The House of the Dragon season finale was perfect. Almost. So House of the Dragon has taken the world by storm, and for 10 weeks in a row I had sold myself to Daemon Targaryen, willing to let him violate me. In other words, I really like the show. After the first Sunday without an episode, I think I can safely say that this show made me feel something special. A way that a TV show hasn't made me feel since, well, Game of Thrones. Now I know that I just recently covered House of the Dragon and I wasn't planning on making another video about it, but after the finale I realized that I just had a lot more to say about it. I'm not a sellout, guys, I promise. Essentially, I thought the finale was really good. It was a damn near perfect ending to a season filled with wonder, emotions, and of course, dread. No episode captured the pure dread of this show like the finale did. It had the straightforward yet extremely important task of showing what led Rhaenyra to go to war, through the continuous losses she goes through, first with the news of her father's death, then the tragic and brutal death of her newborn son, to of course the death of Lucerys. The ending shot of this episode is the culmination of all this loss, betrayal, and hesitancy, and the look she gives the audience as the screen turns black is enough to convey one simple message: Rhaenyra is going to war. Finally, the stage is set for the Dance of Dragons. This whole season has been building this conflict, and while the occasional moment could have been executed better, looking at this season as a whole, it's a damn near perfect season of television. To me at least. Now I've been very strict with my words here because while I think the finale was almost perfect, I really do need to emphasize the almost, because I do have one problem with the episode, something that I think could have made the finale a true masterpiece, worthy of succeeding Game of Thrones. This thing will be unveiled in due time. But first, what are the good parts of this finale? What makes it almost perfect in the first place? And the answer is pretty much everything. Most of what they do in this episode is golden television, really engaging, thought-provoking, and impactful stuff. The episode opens up with Rhaenyra having to come to grips with this information that her beloved father is dead, but also that her best friend, whom she thought she was on good terms with after the last time they met, has in actuality usurped her throne and given it to Rhaenyra's half-brother, and that she needs to come to King's Landing and swear fealty to King Aegon or a war will ensue. The episode sees Rhaenyra being very hesitant with starting a war, because she has so many conflicting emotions flooding through her. All the while, Daemon is fully set on going to war, in part to protect his family and his people, but probably also because stuff like this is his true calling. In between this drama, we get a truly excruciating scene of Rhaenyra giving birth to her deformed and dead son, and we see Daemon processing his grief in his own little way. However, this episode isn't just all doom and gloom, it has some awesome moments as well, such as Daemon crowning Rhaenyra, and her accepting the role of queen. We also get Daemon using Caraxes to threaten the Kingsguard soldiers to swear loyalty to Rhaenyra, and we also see Daemon finding and possibly taming Vermithor, the second largest dragon alive behind Vhagar. We also get the confrontation between Daemon, Rhaenyra, and Otto, and of course we have the tumble in the skies. But first, leave a like on the video. It's a lot of fun. Seriously, the like button will do a little celebration. Go on. Try it. However, this whole dragon chasing scene was amazing, and the payoff, while tragic, was such a good way to end the season and escalate the coming war. However, one thing I really liked about this sequence was the characterization of the dragons. This is something that I mentioned as a possible risk factor in my previous video, namely that they need to develop the dragons and their personalities, because they're going to be very important going further and we need to care about them individually. And I think the characterization here of both Arrax and Vhagar is really good. Arrax is clearly this young, spiffy dragon that's impulsive, and his reaction to Vhagar chasing him shows his inexperience and his youth. Arrax feeling cornered and retaliating felt like something a character would do, not just some MacGuffin dragon. Vhagar has already been characterized a lot in the season, but her pride is portrayed beautifully when Arrax attacks her. No one is the master of Vhagar, and she makes sure Aemon knows this when he loses control of his dragon. It's a cool throwback to Viserys' line about how it's an illusion that the Targaryens think that they can control dragons. Listen, perhaps I'm reading way too much into this. Maybe it's just two scaly lizards and nothing more. But this episode made me care about Arrax and made me appreciate Vhagar even more. Both Lucerys and Aemon losing control of their dragons was so interesting, and Aemon's face at the end says it all. This scene was just really good. However, despite how amazing I think this finale is, I still have one gripe with it. Something I thought it could have done that would have truly sealed the deal. Now I'll try to explain my thoughts thoughts in full detail, and hopefully it makes sense. But remember, if you don't agree, then you can always let me know down below. But first of all, this episode felt more like a typical episode 9 of Game of Thrones, rather than a finale. And that's not to say that I want this show to mimic Game of Thrones, absolutely not. But one thing that made Game of Thrones finales so special was how they always came after a massive event, and we saw how all the different players reacted to this event. Episode 10 of Game of Thrones Season 1 had the reaction to Ned Stark's death, not just Robb and Catelyn going to war, but also the Lannisters, Sansa, Arya, and so on. The Season 2 finale had the reaction to the Battle of Blackwater, with Stannis dealing with his defeat, the Lannisters consolidating their victory, Tyrion and Tywin's conflict truly starting. Season 3 of course had the reaction to the Red Wedding, and the Season 3 finale is so goated in my opinion. Everyone reacting to this historic event is just so intriguing, and this trend follows into Season 5 and 6 respectively. Now this doesn't mean that cool things can't happen in the finales. There absolutely are big events that happen in the Game of Thrones finales. Again, I don't want House of the Dragon to just mimic Game of Thrones, it needs to stand on its own. But I just think they really could have nailed the finale even harder if we saw both parties' reaction to Luke's death, not just the Blacks. I know we're getting this next season, it's not like it'll just be a void, but if we had also seen Alicent hearing the news from Aemon about what happened and her realization that Rhaenyra absolutely will go to war for this, and we see this realization in both the Greens and the Blacks, then I think the finale honestly would have been perfect. It still should have ended with the shot of Rhaenyra, absolutely, I love that shot. It's such a good ending, but perhaps a scene with the Greens could have happened just before this ending shot. But hey, this is just me. I'm not a writer. I couldn't have written a story nearly as good as House of the Dragon. I want to make it absolutely clear that I love this show. I think it's damn near perfect already. At least it's exactly what I want out of a TV show. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. I don't want this video or title to take anything away from the show. Me saying that the finale was almost perfect isn't a criticism, it's very high praise. I know I throw around the word perfect and masterpiece quite lightly on my channel sometimes, even when I don't really mean it. I guess I just like having a controversial title, but this time I truly mean it. House of the Dragon is fucking amazing, and I can't believe that I have to wait until probably 2024 for Season 2 to come out, but I also don't want them to rush it. Take as much time as you need to make this show as good as it can be, because truly it has the potential to be what Game of Thrones ultimately failed to be, a fantasy masterpiece all the way throughout, and I really hope it manages to live up to at least some of this potential. But that's the thing, Season 2 is going to be difficult to do right, and I don't envy the job the writers have one bit. They've already gripped the world, but now expectations are going to be sky high, compared to before Season 1 came out, where people were still very skeptical and wary of being let down again. But hey, you managed to get us on board, so please, don't let us sink. Honestly, don't think we can take another disappointment. The sex scene between Durin and Elrond being deleted in Rings of Power was already a disappointment enough for me this year. I can't take another one. No, but I have high hopes for Season 2. I haven't read the story forward, and I don't think I will. I like being surprised when I watch something, but obviously I won't be able to stay away from all spoilers. I was sadly spoiled about something happening to Luke minutes before watching the finale due to the damn leak that everyone seemed to watch. But honestly, it made the whole scene with Luke flying to Storm's End so much more thrilling and suspenseful. I only knew that something was going to happen to this little child, but I didn't know what or by whom. But oh lord, did I find out. So yeah, not every spoiler will ruin the experience for me, but I really do hope that I can stay somewhat in the dark moving forward. And I think that's where the nature of George R. R. Martin's book will help a lot with this, because it's written as a history book, and so the writers will have some freedom at least to make their own interpretations of what happens and the different character motivations, which means that internet trolls won't be able to spoil everything. Now to end off, I just wanted to quickly address the fandom, specifically the people who get very worked up over this whole black versus green debate, because I think it has the potential to turn toxic, if it hasn't already. I saw some people online criticizing the finale, saying that Daemon was mischaracterized because he choked Rhaenyra. Apparently people have gotten it into their minds that Daemon is a good guy through and through, and that instead of being the morally gray character we know he is, that he's instead just a family man who only thinks of other people, who could never think of doing this to Rhaenyra. Ryan Condal, one of the showrunners, even addressed the people standing Daemon. He said, "To me, Daemon is the anti-hero of this story. He's a character with a real darkness to him, who's dangerous and charming in equal parts. I knew people would be fascinated by him and latch onto him, but I figured they'd do it in the way they did with Jaime Lannister or Bronn or the Red Viper. I did not think they would oddly apply this sort of super fandom to him and try to justify every single thing he's done as being intrinsically heroic. It simply isn't. It's not the case, nor will it be in the future. And I saw some people responding very negatively to this. Oh, are we not allowed to be fans of characters we like? As if that was the point of Ryan's statement. He said it's perfectly fine to like a character and find them fascinating. He even knew this was going to be the case with Daemon. However, you can like a character and find them super fascinating without having to justify their actions. Listen, I love characters like the Joker or Walter White. I think they're really interesting, but not for being good people. Like, I'm not gonna justify their actions and pretend that they're not the monsters that they are. And it's the same with Daemon. He's not a good guy. He has darkness in him. My man murdered his wife just because he wanted to marry his niece instead. He started a war just because he wanted attention from his brother. He couldn't show love to his children when they needed him. And despite loving his family very dearly, some of his actions are still questionable. He left a young Rhaenyra alone and exposed in a brothel, and yes, in the heat of preparing this massive war, after all the heartache both he and Rhaenyra have gone through this episode, it's absolutely within character for him to act out this way. He's not very in touch with his feelings, so he lashes out. I just think it's important moving forward to keep our expectations of the characters in check. This isn't a story about heroes and villains, it's about a war fought between a very few interconnected houses where everyone is kind of a shitty person. Rhaenys seems to be a good and honorable person, but she killed hundreds if not thousands of people in King's Landing without batting an eye. Yes, Daemon cares deeply about Rhaenyra, Viserys and his daughters, but he's still a maniac. People need to acknowledge that this show is not about heroes and villains, good and evil. That's not how George R. R. Martin writes his stories. It's a story of the tragic downfall of a great house due to a civil war where they all murder each other. So please, you can still think Daemon is an awesome character while also accepting that he's not a good person. But anyways, House of the Dragon Season 1 was a phenomenal season of television that ignited the passion for the world of A Song of Ice and Fire that I thought had been lost. The season finale was also really good, even though I thought it could have been just a little bit better. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the finale and then the season as a whole. If you want to support me further, then check out my Patreon. And as always, a huge thank you to my patrons, and especially Ben Joseph. But for now, have a great day and good night.